your own ground. How you live and how you fly. Smiles you'll give and tears you'll cry. All you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be. Run, rabbit, run.
And run, rabbit, run away from... Actually, the rabbit doesn't need to run anymore, or may not need to be running anymore, away from the medical experimentation, because in the United States of America, the FDA has says we should be reducing unnecessary or cruel animal medical experimentation. And I say that because is there testing that was being done that was unnecessary? And how is it going to be replaced? Oh, that's right. They're going to be using people. So I'm titling this one, everyone, thank you for joining. I'm titling this one 1918-1919, when they learned intramuscular injection was fatally dumb. Fatally dumb. I reposted a video I did a couple days ago this morning, and I showed how there is near 100% correlation. Causation is, of course, one more jump, but correlation between the discussion, the references to of something called infantile paralysis throughout United States newspapers and other publications, starting to escalate slowly around the year 1900, peaking around 1916, 17, 18, 19, and how it appears as though infantile paralysis correlates with intramuscular injection. And infantile paralysis oftentimes are children that were healthy, and then one day they just stopped being able to move, or started having limb, issues being able to control some of their limbs. Sometimes they would recover, sometimes they would die. Now, this was called polio also. And isn't it amazing that there was an eradication of polio, which I believe was really nothing more than trying to find a way to do an intramuscular injection that hurt babies less. So the cure of polio was to find a way to continue intramuscular injection using something that would hurt babies less. And I think that was the Jonas Salk. First of all, they tried it with oral. This is the early 1950s. And the injection was made using monkey kidney cells. Chimpanzee, I believe. I think they were hoping that if they sourced some of the material from a primate that was closer to human, then perhaps they would have less problems. I think they tried a whole bunch of things. But that was the cure for polio. And that's sad. But polio itself, I believe, is really just an intramuscular injection injury. I bet you could give an infantile paralysis by an intramuscular injection of a handful of garden soil. You inject some garden soil and you inject some food from the refrigerator, I'll bet you can cause every injury which is currently associated with vaccines. However, if they were to inhale it or eat it or whatever, totally different story. Or if it's administered on the skin, totally different story. So, we found an article here. If you go to this massive page that I've been building up on vaccines and the history of intramuscular injection of vaccines in particular, I found 2 or 3 articles that I'm going to read tonight that are going to put some of this into perspective. First, I'm going to highlight this one from 1901. So, of course, this is several years before, 15 years or so before the great influenza. But in 1901, we have more vaccines being introduced, and all the new vaccines that are being introduced are intramuscular injection. Keep in mind the smallpox vaccine has been in use for 80 to nearly 90 years. 90 years of the smallpox vaccine being used, administered with ivory points, administered on the skin after the skin was cut. While there may be scars, there could be a skin infection. But there was no infantile paralysis for 80 years of vaccination. The infantile paralysis did not start until the intramuscular injection. And it wasn't because they were intramuscularly injecting a vaccine. It's because they were intramuscularly injecting stuff. So in 1901, Marion Leader the more rapid action of medical substances injected into the tissues immediately beneath the skin has been recognized for many years. Of course, they're talking about the injection of either a saline solution of water or morphine. That's what they're talking about here. So, yeah, there's an uptake that's faster with using a hypodermic needle and an intramuscular injection. Of course, it is for this reason that in case of emergency, the hypodermic needle is called into play rather than administration by mouth. A Virginian physician has discovered that in those cases where water is ejected beneath the skin in large quantities to overcome excessive loss of blood, the addition of such a product as lithia, causing the kidneys to begin vigorous action, has been found of immense advantage. The old idea of injection immediately into the veins or arteries has been abandoned, has transfusion, or the transfer of blood from one individual to another. And at the present time, excessive blood loss is made up by large injections of so-called normal salt solution, a solution containing the same amount of normal salt as there is in the blood. So this is the state of the art in the year 1901. If you can see in 1909, science defeats typhoid. They really believe that they finally have a intramuscular injection or a vaccine which they can use to defeat typhoid. Army officers assert that the vaccine is successful, practically no inconvenience to those who take the treatment, and in every case the disease was warded off. Right out of Washington, D.C. Of course, as it says, the vaccine is manufactured at the Army Medical Museum Laboratory from cultures of the typhoid bacillus that are sterilized or killed by heat immediately before the injection of the vaccine is made into the human system. It is injected with a hypodermic syringe not scratched on the arm, as is the case of the smallpox vaccine. The injection is made into the arm. It makes no sore, but causes a temporary swelling. This disappears after 24 hours, and no scar is left. Those who are vaccinated with this new vaccine are a trifle ill for a few hours after the injection. We give 2 vaccination intervals from 10 days to 2 weeks apart. Now they're intramuscular injection of all the new vaccines. You can hear, this is June 27th, 1916. Militia hears of border calls. This is an interesting one because it talks about U.S. soldiers fainting, sometimes after the intramuscular injection of these new vaccines. Now, this says that some actually passed out just at the sight of the needle. For some reason, I think that's BS. I think people were passing out after the injection, and they were just trying to say that some of the soldiers were of a weak constitution. Vaccine illness. Look at this. So the anti-typhoid fever vaccination is giving people illness. So they're having troubles administering the vaccine to the U.S. military. They're getting sick. So what are they doing? They're using more shots now. They're instead of 2 shots, it's now 3 shots or 4 shots. It's becoming a nightmare to manage. So they want a way to be able to make it easier to administer the shot. They want the military recipient to not get as sick. And they thought maybe there's a way we can inject all of it at once and then have it slowly released. And that's where this thing came in. And I've covered this already. French science discovers method of inoculation causing no ill effect. This is the Lipovaccine. Paris, France, June 26th, 1918. French science has made a step forward that not only saves 99 lives where 100 were formerly sacrificed, but guarantees comparative immunity to the entire army from the dread scourge of typhoid fever through a new process of vaccination that does not put the inoculated soldier on the list of indisposed. Through the use of anti-typhoid vaccine in a new form called Lipovaccine, the government has reduced the mortality among soldiers from typhoid to 1 in 100,000 as compared to the pre-war figures of 100 in every 100,000. In addition, the injection of the germ culture does not produce a fever in the patient. I believe that might have been true, at least immediately, nor cause him any inconvenience beyond the temporary scratch of the syringe. A short time prior to the declaration of hostilities, a law was passed in France making anti-typhoid vaccination compulsory.
It then goes on to say,
To be effective, the serum had to contain a culture of at least 2 billion microbes whose sudden appearance in the human system might well be calculated to cause distress because of their rapid spread throughout the veins and arteries. It was for this reason that the anti-typhoid vaccine was usually administered in from 2 to 4 injections depending upon the patient's physical condition. Thus, every time a hypodermic was used, the soldier usually had to be retired from active duty unless he was of extraordinarily strong constitution. Experiments made by leading chemists of the nation resulted in the early discovery that the illness of the troops was brought about by the rapidity with which watery solution and its charge of microbes was assimilated by the blood after intramuscular injection. The injections of the Ebrith bacilli and the paratyphoid cultures, frequently placing 75% of the troops on the sick list. As the effectiveness of the vaccine only constitutes for about a year, a large part of the French forces was thus continually indisposed and resulted in the loss of valuable units. The chief surgeon of the Navy, Dr. Le Monnier, was one of the first to discover that by making the injections or vaccinations with an oily or greasy substance, the spread of the bacilli throughout the system was less rapid, although as thoroughly efficacious. After a number of carefully conducted experiments, Dr. Lemoyne ascertained that through the employment of germ cultures contained in oil, the 2 billion bacilli could be introduced simultaneously without the necessity of 3 or 4 picks. So, this Lipovaccine, this is a gold mine. It's amazing how a channel with only a couple thousand, not even 2,000 subscribers, is part of, along with a couple of other genuine, amazing people. You know who they are. Understanding the 1918 flu, we're getting to the bottom of why vaccines are perceived or have caused damage in many cases because vaccines, modern vaccines, are oftentimes intramuscular injection. You know, all of the September 11th research that we've done, tying it to the desire to stage a large-scale biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center that was going to result in the rollout of gene therapy vaccines, anthrax vaccines, and Robert Malone being part of that. I mean, I don't even know how much stuff I could break here. It's ridiculous for, user-supported and self-supported how much we're doing here for only 2,000 followers on YouTube. I found a guy that was a nobody that didn't even have a channel until 2022 or 23. He calls himself a 10-year nuclear engineer, and he already has 700,000 subscribers as a nuclear physics specialist. So he left his job to make YouTube videos, and now suddenly has 700,000 followers. So, anyways, but I'm going to keep on fighting here. We found other stuff after this, okay? Of course, there's lots of articles about the Lipovaccine, about the different oils that it uses, etc. Of course, Tampa Tribune, this is October 9th. Here we're talking about suddenly there's a lot of influenza going around. Oh, by the way, also, Lipovaccine technology was released by the military to also make influenza vaccines for the general population. So the general population also had access to lipo vaccines in certain time windows, which, believe it or not, also correspond to the surges of death of influenza in 1918 and 1919. So you can see lipo vaccines March 19th, 1919. So no more lipo vaccines. They're going away. This means that the saline triple typhoid vaccine and saline pneumonia vaccine are the ones that are going to be replacing the lipo vaccines. It says lipo vaccines were adopted as a war measure on account of their advantages and have served their purpose. The process of their manufacture, again, this is early 1919, the process of their manufacture needs further improvement. And thus the duration of their protective power as compared with that of saline vaccines requires further investigation. Saline vaccines will therefore be used as a routine, and lipo vaccines will be reserved for emergencies. All surplus lipo vaccines will be returned to the U.S. Army School at Washington. Well, isn't that amazing? So you can find these articles about how the lipo vaccine worked so awesome. It did its job. No problems. Amazing protection. And then they recalled it. And then they stopped using it. Why do you stop using something that's awesome? You don't. You keep using things that are awesome. And if something is a catastrophe, you stop using it and you say it was awesome, but you could tune it a little bit. You know what happened? Is this was one of the worst things that was ever injected into any human being. And a lot of people got these vaccines, mostly military. Another one, this is an article from the Buffalo News. Gowanda will have Chautauqua in August. So this is about a Native American territory and how many Native Americans were offered the Lipovaccine. And that's amazing because we know that the population in the United States and in Canada actually had the highest rate of death from the pneumonia in 1918 and 1919 were Native Americans. So now we have evidence that these poor people living on the reservation were offered these vaccines. Wow. Isn't it amazing that they died in higher numbers? I wonder if the odds of them getting these vaccines was actually higher. I wonder if they were even used for medical experimentation purposes. Instead, this is being misinterpreted by people with tens or hundreds of thousands of subscribers as evidence that Fauci and his associates may be right that the 1918 flu evolved after some chicken and toad event, I don't know, in the frozen tundra up in Alaska. Now, here we go. Now it gets better. This is February 17th, 1920. This is the Iola, town in Kansas, Register. I'm going to read this one. This, again, February 17th, 1920. Notice, the demand for the one-dose Lipovaccine for influenza and pneumonia exhausted our supply, but we took advantage of the situation and telegraphed Dr. Rosenau of the Mayo Clinic for more vaccine. Sunday, we received the much-needed supply from Rochester, but only enough for 150 people. This Lipovaccine is much better than the salt solution vaccine that is being used. So there's still some people getting it in early 1920. The immunity is more marked and more enduring. The bacterial suspension is 10 times greater. The Lipovaccine is an oil vaccine given in one small dose. It does not make one sick. And I'll bet you it doesn't. Of course, as that oil breaks down in the muscle, who knows what happens over the next few months. It does not make one sick, and the reaction on the arm is very mild. It is the best preventative known for influenza and pneumonia, and I'm showing that the Lipovaccine also made its way to citizens here, to everyday people. Easier, okay? This is where it gets even crazier. Because here we are on October 6th, 1922. Doctor promises pneumonia cure in new vaccine. Development of a new form of pneumonia vaccine so that it can be administered intranasally by means of an atomizer instead of by hypodermic injection, and a great improvement in the manufacture of effective vaccine was announced yesterday by Dr. Russell L. Cecil, that's C-E-C-I-L, of the United States Public Health Service. Dr. Cecil, who had been working for more than a year on the improvement of pneumonia vaccine, which was first used at Camp Upton in 1917, said he believed the new process would prove effective in controlling the disease, which causes more than 150,000 deaths annually. This is pneumonia. The chief difficulty has been to find a new method of administering a vaccine that would be pleasant and overcome the objection to needle vaccine administration. So, the inventor of the Lipovaccine, a vaccine that they said was awesome, but they stopped making available. A vaccine that was intramuscular injection, and probably one of the most horrible ideas of all time, or misguided anyways. The inventor of that pivoted full-time to trying to make a nasal vaccine for pneumonia starting in 1919, and here it is 1922, and he's getting ready to roll it out. Experiments with monkeys have made them immune to pneumonia after 3 injections of the vaccine. So I don't know how they did the whole actual test to determine if they are immune. But look, The chief difficulty has been to find a method of administering the vaccine which would be pleasant and overcome the objection of needle vaccine administration. I'm going to rephrase that another way. The chief difficulty of the vaccines that they were rolling out for the military was that it was intramuscular injection and it was killing people. I'll bet you this Dr. Cecil also knew that it was probably also causing problems in infants, babies that were receiving intramuscular injection. The instances of infantile paralysis were exploding, a 1,000 times increase. Starting in 1880 to this point in time, over 1,000 times increase. Babies were becoming paralyzed. Flu was out of control. People were sick and dying. Military personnel were dying of the flu. Oh, at least they didn't get their typhoid. This doctor knew, and I think most of them knew, holy shit, that Lipovaccine was horrible. And they're trying to find a new way to administer it. Believe it or not, it took almost 80 years before Flu Mist came out. 80 years. And as of 2017, the United States government still says it does not recommend people use the Flu Mist, that instead they go with the hypodermic needle injection because the Flu Mist isn't as effective. I'm trying to highlight probably the crux of the issue. They knew was the administration of any vaccine. It wasn't just this one. It was any vaccine. And I think Cecil knew it. I think a lot of scientists have known this for a while. These articles are freaking amazing. Look at this one here. This is from 1923. Will this vaccine banish pneumonia? Look. The anti-pneumonia vaccine was first administered hypodermically. Oh, no. Ouch. Going into the muscle. And here we are, the atomizing it. Dr. Cecil, this scientist that they're drawing the picture of here, is the inventor of that Lipovaccine that is perfectly correlated with the 1918 influenza. Matter of fact, the technology came out of France. Of course, there were other things in 1918 and 1919. There was, as I have the articles collected, up to a third of all animals were dying on each voyage. So the troops, they're malnourished, they're stressed, they're in the ocean, badly ventilated boats. Animals are dying of pneumonia. So there's a lot of bad conditions going around here. Now, if you take those military personnel and you inject this kind of crap into their arms, it's only going to get worse. Why was this guy trying to pivot to another way to administer vaccines? They knew the intramuscular injection was the problem. They knew that the intramuscular injection was the problem with vaccines. They knew it. I think that they knew it in 1919. And unfortunately, we have paid influencers on social media right now still doing videos. Matter of fact, today I heard Polly Tomy. She isn't even American. And I don't care if she has residency or citizenship or not. She was born in another country. There's no... Boy, do I want to use the F-bomb here right now. There's no reason why someone from another country should go to the United States Congress before anybody born in this country and talk about what Americans need to do. I would never, ever, ever, ever go to another country and just because I'm a taxpayer for a few years, think that I have the right to go into government in that nation and then speak for everyone that's been born there and lived there for many generations. Here, there's two more. Use of hypodermic needle growing. Look at this one, 1923. Okay, this is the one I loved. Without it, doctors couldn't keep house. Many vaccine failures. September 20th. Washington, D.C., 1923. Kipling, with his Colonel's Lady and Judy O'Grady, long ago discovered that it's what under the skin that counts. Doctors today apparently agree with him. Without hypodermic needle, they couldn't keep house. Serums and extracts and vaccines, all these they use for, quote, shots in the arm, unquote, as treatments for all kinds of ailments and diseases. Dr. Edward Francis of the United States Public Health Service here said, quote, serums have been tried as cures for many diseases, but have been successful so far in curbing only 2 diseases, diphtheria and lockjaw. He went on to say, serum treatment for persons suffering from pneumonia, typhoid fever, dysentery, bubonic plague, and cholera have been failures, unquote. It goes on to say, what about vaccines? Vaccination against smallpox is well known and so successful that it was now taken for granted. A preventative for typhoid fever was given successfully by hypodermic injection to the American troops during the war. They also tried to give the boys shots, which would protect them against flu. But this was a failure. So was an attempted vaccine against tuberculosis. Physicians in the public health service have long been working on a vaccine against the, quote, common cold, unquote. Someday they may get it. When they do, a lot of inefficiency due to sniffles, sore throats, and chest colds will disappear, and life will be much brighter for every day. So, it says the vaccines are not working at the time. I mean, it keeps the door open. This is not an article that says vaccines don't work. It says that the smallpox vaccine did work. One of the problems with the smallpox vaccine analysis is that, yes, during the time that the smallpox vaccine was created and administered, there were dramatic decreases in the death of children, dramatic increases in life expectancy, dramatic decreases in deaths from infectious disease. That's absolutely true. However, it also totally correlates with massive changes in sanitation, changes in food quality, changes in using soap and hygiene and clean water, etc. So it becomes somewhat inseparable. However, if someone wants to say that the smallpox vaccine definitely saved a lot of lives or whatever, it'd be hard to disprove it. Let's put it that way. But you can allow them to have that opinion. Maybe it did help a little bit. It's not a fight you need to die fighting, though. It's not the hill to die on. The 1919 flu, if you read the articles and you understand the nature of this lipovaccine, if you're willing to accept just how catastrophic intramuscular injection is, you're going to have an incredible revelation, an incredible insight there. And you can see the very scientists that were inventing vaccines going into there right afterwards said, well, we're going to do something else. I think it's possible that the current flu mist vaccine actually, they consider a live virus. This is today. I think it's possible it may actually cause a transfection in the nasal passages. I also think it shows that there is acknowledgement somewhere that there needs to be a new way to regularly do vaccines in the future. There was no polio. There was no infantile paralysis until the rollout of hypodermic needles, hypodermic injections, intramuscular injection into babies. And that was around 1900. Because with the main symptoms of polio being the paralysis, if there was no widespread infantile paralysis until babies were receiving intramuscular injections. Amazing articles, guys. Amazing articles. I don't know. I'm just going to keep on archiving. Keep on rocking the free world here.
The lunatic is on the grass. The lunatic is on the grass.
Oh, yeah. Look at this one. Hypodermic vaccination to prevent formation of scar. So here's doctors advocating for the use of hypodermic injection solely so women don't get scars. Can you believe that? This is October 24th, 1923. This is another good article. No more lipovaccines. The use of the lipovaccine has been discontinued, however, on account of the difficulty encountered in sterilizing the material suspended in oil. Maybe it was the fact that it was intramuscular injection. Because it's a stupid freaking idea. Have a good one.